I'm Jamie S. Rich, and this is Back to the Gutters.
I like to use these Pentel pocket brushes.
Yeah, it's a beautiful book. I use a Winsor Newton Series 7. I love comics, so I was
This week on Back to the Gutters, we are in the house of Jeff Parker, the author of Underground, Bucko, Mysterious and Unfathomable, currently the writer of Flash Gordon, AQUAMAN, stuff for Marvel. I can't keep it all straight, Jeff, so you're going to have to help me out here as we work our way through your illustrious career.
Batman 66.
Batman 66, that is actually a major
AQUAMAN. Just anything with a man is being written by me now.
So thank you for having us over here.
Oh, thank you.
The main reason I actually want to talk to you is I want to get something cleared up. Were you raised as a druid, or is your father just a druid now in later life?
I don't know why that's on my Wikipedia page. Yeah, the wording makes it like, is my dad a druid or me? Orthodox druid too. I didn't know there was another type of druid that was more progressive or something like that. That's a pretty out-of-date Wikipedia page, sorry.
So he's no longer a druid?
He's not even alive.
Oh, well, sorry to hear that then. For some reason, I guess I thought you would encourage people to go monkey with your Wikipedia page.
I did. At one part, it became a kind of some kind of a fiction writing contest, and it got really good there. I was like, wow, that's pretty impressive.
So where is it then that you came from? What's your background? How did you make your way towards the comic book world?
I always wanted to work in comics. When I was a kid, my dad had a grocery store, and when he wasn't being a druid, and I constantly just leafed through the spinner rack, read absolutely everything, sat on the Coke machine, and I had always planned, like, I was going to do something. Well, I think at first I thought, I will fight crime and or solve mysteries. And then at some point you realize maybe I should probably just shoot for stories about that sort of thing. I went to college. I was an English lit major. I hid out in college for a really long time until even I couldn't stand to be there anymore and finally moved on. But I broke into comics as an artist. I was always going around to shows, showing artists and editors my samples until they finally, I guess, relented and started giving me work. And I was doing that for like the mid-90s on, and if you remember the 90s, comics all crashed.
Yeah.
A speculator bubble blew apart, and I couldn't find work. So I moved out to California and started working in animation, and I started doing storyboards. And the whole time there, I was working on the METEOR Man graphic novel, which I wrote. And after that came out in 2003, suddenly people started asking me to write. And I was happy to do that. It was really fun to get to work with other artists, you know, and from that end. And then now no one remembers I draw anymore. And I think that's everybody gets into comics by working in some other part of it and then ends up doing whatever they do.
So you jump around a lot from company to company because you're currently working for both Marvel and DC.
Yeah, no, I'm not doing anything for Marvel right now. It's mostly DC. Also Dynamite with the Flash Gordon series, and a little bit of Rovio IDW for Angry Birds. So that's a good mix.
Like, you seem to have a handle on like these odd worlds and these different environments, because it's the same with Flash Gordon. You're away from the familiar environment of our planet and you're playing around in a different world. Does that kind of stuff attract you?
I get excited whenever I get to do something different because I feel like it's a chance to, one, not fall into a rut. So, you know, if there were Westerns were doing well, I would definitely be doing a Western, you know, if I could get a publisher into it. Anything like that. I just always look at, and the more goofy and outlandish the concepts are, it doesn't matter, because I feel like you have to make the characters be reacting and motivated by something extremely normal under the surface. And then all of it, no matter how weird it is, one thing I never try to do, I think, is bore people by making it realistic, because it's like, I don't care.
Yeah. So how much do you gear how you're writing to like who you're collaborating with?
Not completely. I don't like writing, even though it happens, I don't like writing a script and I don't know who it's going to be drawn by. I try to really take into it. I don't want to make them draw the same thing they always draw. I think that gets done to a lot of artists, and it's a horrible practice.
So on something like a create-your-own book, like Mysterious and Unfathomable, did you seek out Tom Fowler, or did that somehow come out through a different...
Well, early on we did. One thing is Fowler became available from whatever he was working on, and he said he was looking for something. And it was funny because I had already asked him to work on some other thing, and my editor had asked him a thing at Marvel, and I think it was actually Spider-Man 1602, which that would have been interesting. And the editor passed on him right as I'd talked to Ben about it, and he's like, yeah, that'd be great. I'd been wanting to work with Tom. And Tom had this weird up and down minute of losing a job, and then a minute later, the email coming in for this other job, which is like, oh, I wish I could have been looking over his shoulder when he was checking his email. And of course, this worked out a lot better because he got to create something that he's an owner in, and also it's right up Tom's alley. It's humor, but occasionally scary stuff, and an unlikable but interesting character that you connect with, and you don't care that you wouldn't be his friend, and you really shouldn't be, but you want to see how he's going to behave in any situation.
That kind of describes Tom.
It really does. To me, I just looked at it like, well, I'm just writing the adventures of Tom with magic powers.
Mysterious you did around the same time as Underground with Lieber? Or those?
Yeah.
So those are two kind of almost polar opposite books. It's
because
crazy
there's
humor,
nothing
magic.
mystical or weird about Underground. It's all completely possible stuff that we researched. And that kind of came out of Steve Lieber was originally going to do it on his own. And at least that's what he says. But he also, at the same time, I would be over there working on a project at a desk nearby, and he would tell me all this stuff that he had just watched on a video or read in a book about caving while he was working. He was in his research mode, and really what he was doing was just filling my head with his research. So then suddenly I had opinions on it, and he kept asking me for what could I do? Like, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Until finally one day I'm just writing it, and I didn't even realize the shift happened so smoothly. But that was really great, and it's got a good page turner quality because all I had to do was stay ahead of Steve on script. And so I would just write 2 or 3 pages at a time because Steve could only do it in his off hours when he wasn't doing, or when he was waiting for whatever script he was being paid for, or ad work. And so I would make things really conclude at the end of a page in a way I probably don't do it the rest of the time. And it really did make it so like, ooh, and I wouldn't want to do that all the time because I feel like, you probably should work more long form than that generally. But I did that, and I did that with Bucko with Erica.
See, and I guess I had heard that about you before, that you would write, like you'd write a page here for Agents of Atlas and a page over here for Underground, and you would do a couple pages for each at a time.
Well, it depends. If I was being paid, I tended to turn in a whole script. And if I'm not being paid,
that makes sense.
Here's the 3 pages I had time for,
But
they're 3 good pages, and I'll stand by them. But
so what's your general process then if you're starting off? Let's say you're going to start your next Aquaman script. Do you initially then have to pitch that idea to your editor for that particular issue, and you begin with that, or?
Yeah, they try to get you to fill in this whole little thing. What's going to happen? What's the highlights of this issue? And for them, it's also for promotion so that they can pass it on and they can compare it to other books and make sure you're not all doing the same story, which is a big thing. So yeah, I try to dodge them as long as possible of telling them what's going to happen, and then finally they go, no, I absolutely have to know what's going to happen in issue 40. And then I finally go, okay. And then I figure out what's going to happen in issue 40 before they fire me.
So when you're writing in general, do you usually do a detailed outline, or how is let's actually get off, say, Aquaman and work on something like, say, Underground. How much did you plan ahead? That
I had a detailed outline. I had a long outline, and that's all I worked from for the rest of the thing. And then a lot of times I'll then put the outline far away, and then I just work on it as I go. And then I think, what did I have originally? And I always assume that's going to diverge wildly, and then I go, oh, actually, I'm kind of fairly close to the path I had made. So it's kind of surprising. It's usually unlicensed material, where the editors are really asking for it constantly, that I'll do a very point-by-point breakdown of what's going to be in an issue. And I should do it more often because it actually helps me. It forces me to figure it out, and then I can embellish on that. But a lot of times I will just like, here's a paragraph about what's going to happen, a very short paragraph.
Yeah, well, because you seem to like enjoy the idea of like discovering as you go and letting the process of writing inform what's happening with the story.
Yeah, because I don't want it to be plot driven. It's got to be character driven plot, not the other way around. You got to figure out the plot. You can't just bumble into it and hope a plot shows up.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I like to say what the plot's going to be and then not refer to it again for a while, and hopefully let the characters go through the motions until they start like pushing the story around in a way that makes sense for them. And then to me, it just comes alive. You know, then the characters are really doing stuff, and it's like, that's consistent. They're doing what you would expect or not what you would expect, but it makes sense. Yeah, you can really tell, and it happens a lot in probably licensed material when a plot is being, adhered to very strictly, and it's like, now the characters are just saying what the plot is. This isn't good.
Have you ever found yourself where you've written yourself into a corner and you
Yes.
don't know how to get out of it?
Yeah, sometimes, but now I've done it so long, I do it to myself as a game. I do it all the time on Batman 66. Like, I'll put him in a death trap, but I have no idea how he's going to get out of it. And I'll end it at the part 1 of the 10 pages, and then the next one, it's like, well, now I've got to figure out how Batman got... Because I think they did that on the show.
Yeah.
At least it seemed like a couple of times they did it. I like to do that just as, like, keep me... I feel like, this won't seem too easy if they have to really... And also, it's Batman 66. He can do something really wild to get out of it.
Was it daunting taking over Batman 66, knowing it was so beloved and knowing there was like this image of it that people have in their minds?
Not really, because I think what I was more worried about was I was really deathly afraid someone would get assigned to it who would just make fun of it. And I was like, no, you got to actually... Well, one, I don't think you should be fanish about something. I don't think you should be a fan first. It's not fanfic. But at the same time, it's like, you got to kind of understand why this works the way it does. And if you just go in like making fun of it, you're going to miss the point. It's like they were in on the joke during the show. And the humor works in a very specific way. So I didn't wait any time when Jim Chadwick wrote to me. I immediately called back and went, yep, don't talk to anybody else. I want this.
And you worked with Sandy Jarrell on some of those. Was that the first time you guys worked together, or was Meteor Men started before
Meteor Men started before, and then like halfway through we worked on Batman 66, because I thought, well, Sandy would be perfect for this. This is right up his alley. He knows more about it than me.
What was the approach to writing for him for Meteor Men?
Yeah, since I knew it was going to be focusing on teen characters, I thought no one can do this better than him, or not many people anyway, and people still didn't really know his stuff yet.
How did you guys collaborate? There's a sequence in there where the main character interfaces with the alien, and he basically goes into the alien's brain and sees where he came from and how he got here, and it's very intricate.
Yeah.
And images within images. How did you guys create that? Did you go back and forth together?
Even though I would occasionally send Sandy roughs, it was just... On that, I didn't, and I just let him go nuts with how he wanted to interpret it. I wrote it very amorphous instead of my usual panel 1 description, panel 2. That was one of the ones where he just gets a big block of text of me saying, here's what needs to happen, because I don't really know how you want to show this.
Right.
It's a really hard concept to get across, and he really put on his Alex Toth hat, I feel, and did these incredible layouts, and the ones with all the circle panels and everything radiating out. It's great stuff. And yeah, that's the kind of thing you can only do in comics. You can't do that in some other medium in that same way.
So are you mainly a full script writer? You panel 1?
Yeah, I
page 1?
usually write full script. I only kind of back off when it becomes just a pure action scene. And then I don't want to limit the artist to what they might want to. They'll come up with good stuff, and I don't want to say, now have his fist at this point, blah blah blah. Only when I really have to break it down. Other than that, I say, okay, for these 2 pages, here's what needs to happen, and then I try to stay out of the way. I don't have any mouths open because I'm not having anybody talk, something like that. I see people all the time trying to write action scenes, and I always feel like just leave that to the artist, because you didn't really know how that was going to play out in real life, and or go get someone else who's better at these sort of things to come in and advise. And you see it a lot of times with people using guns the wrong way, things like that. They just don't know how to. You got to research it all.
Because when I'll do talking head sequences, like when I'm writing the romance books, I'll just write pages of dialogue and break it up as what needs to fit in a particular panel and add emotion. But at that point, I think it's like the first time I did that was with Joelle on 12 Reasons Why I Love Her. And like, they're in a taxi cab. Like, there's no way I'm going to art direct this and create angles for you that's going to be any better than you're going to come up with.
Yeah. My rule for dialogue heavy scenes is I just try to find an excuse to set it somewhere interesting. Like, can they be at the, at the state aquarium walking around in front of some loggerhead sea turtles or something? I know it sounds like AQUAMAN thinking, but I'm just trying to give the artist, because I've been in 2 big studios of artists over the years, and I've had to hear lots of artists complain about, I just got a talking head sequence, and they're supposed to be in an office room, and it's like, boy, they just lose so much. There's like, if you couldn't at least set it in a junkyard or something where they have something to work with. I
usually apologize. I'm like, hey guys, these 2 pages, I'm going to get some information out, so just bear with me. I'll let you have fun in a second.
It's always interesting, the solutions to try to get exposition out, because it's got to get out. At some point, you've got to get some of these things, and you've got to find clever ways to do it. I don't like to do a bunch of narrative. I feel like then I'm not using comics to its potential if it's a bunch of blocks of blah, 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 I'm a private detective and person's fooling around. Here, I'd rather everybody be shown things, or they kind of discover along at the same time you're reading it.
Is there any piece of advice you'd give to writers learning their craft?
I would advise most writers to please not think of it as television. It's not television. It's a series of frozen moments, and don't think about it the way you would think about a screenplay.
What's the plan for to feature Jeff Parker?
Now I've got to figure out. I'm really very happy with all my projects, but now I've got to figure out how to actually make ongoing money on things I own. Every so often we keep coming out with something original, and I want to keep doing that, but I want to eventually transition to things that I created.
Before we take off, we're going to go down and take a look at, apparently you've got a bicycle I need to see.
Where I often work is also down where I do all my workshop stuff. So you might as well do stories down there too. And I apologize if you step on a rusty nail.
Now, as we're passing by here, I notice there's lots of stuff in your yard, but you've got this zip line.
Zip line, I made that. I was working on the comic How-Toons, and it was about how to make a home playground. And I thought, I can't just write about this in the abstract and hope kids don't get killed. Right. I need to actually make it. So,
all right.
The basement.
Where the magic happens.
It's kind of a work in progress, sorry. Back in here is where I essentially work on everything, so why should comics be any different? There's my desk. This was, you can't see it because it's buried under, oh, hey, look, Archer & Co.
Aw, see?
Yeah.
So you got some good books. You want me? I'm going to sign this for you.
Yeah, please do. That was a desk that was in my dad's store when I was a kid, so I've kept that forever. Similarly, I also have this old Coke machine that I think I mentioned I used to sit on and read comics from.
So this is where you sat on this thing and you dreamed about.
Yeah, so I sat on that. I drank the tiny little 10-ounce Cokes, and just blah, 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 blah. Didn't know I was actually preparing for a career the entire time. And a lot of times I tend to work on old bicycles because I like old 10 speeds.
So do you find, do you work on other stuff as sort of an escape from writing?
Yes, I am like a lot of creators, I am prone to anxiety, panic attacks, things like that. And I found a few years ago that by kind of leaning into doing more stuff like working on the house or working on cars or bikes, it kind of brought me back down and grounded me. Because otherwise, you're in your head all the time, and that's actually not that healthy for you. So working with physical stuff and real tools and stuff like that, is typically how I ground myself. And it's like therapy that also saves you having to pay somebody else to repair things. So, yeah.
Well, thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having us in your house, having us upstairs, having us downstairs, and walking us through your entire process.
This is a real show, right?
Yes, it is. Online.
Okay, well, yeah, then great. Thanks for having me on.
All right, man.
If it's real.
It's real, I promise.
Okay.